Where are you?
How's it going, everyone? Today we have a special guest, and I'll explain why I kind of reached out to him. But Raoul Trujillo is an incredible actor, painter, Army veteran, dancer, just an overall incredible human being, incredible background. And the reason why I reached out is because of his portrayal in Mel Gibson's Apocalypto as Zero Wolf, which is the first time I've actually watched an entire foreign language film all the way through without even looking at the words So thank you for that role, and thank you for jumping on here today with us.
Oh, hey, it's my pleasure, man. Where are you? Where are you talking from?
I am in Massachusetts right now. So
Oh, okay. So you got snow. You got cold.
yeah, no, it's a weird winter. It's one of those winters where the Farmer's Almanac was actually right, and it's kind of it's been all right with especially the last year with the pandemic and everything. How has that affected you, kind of mentally, physically, spiritually? Like, how have you kind of had to reset yourself as you move forward?
Well, I live in a make-believe world anyway, so and where I'm based is in total isolation on a ranch in northern New Mexico. So it didn't really affect me, and it affected me because I wasn't working, but I was able to be somewhere where I could stay isolated, stay grounded, and be on the land, and not really have to be around all the fear that I sort of felt once. 11 months later, I came back to work, came here to LA, and I was just amazed at like just the fear and the look on people's faces of like really being native and coming from a whole background of struggling and innate suffering on some level. It's like, dude, this is life. Get used to it. This is what it's like to live under the thumb of something that challenges you. Yeah. So for me, it's like I've been social distancing for decades. So it wasn't really a huge stretch for me.
Right. And I guess one of the topics is very interesting is that the indigenous peoples or Native Americans, like with everything going on, and I'm glad you brought it up, it's very fascinating that those people and stuff have dealt with the craziness and the slaughter and all this bad stuff to them. Yet now it's almost like you kind of see like, man, what they've been going through their whole lives, we're now doing the last year. It kind of puts stuff in perspective.
It really does. All of a sudden, privileged uh, people have to now look at it like, oh, I can't go out to eat at restaurants anymore. I can't do this. I can't do that. And you're like, and then you understand the thing, understanding first world problems and white people's problems. It's like, guys, get over it. There's a lot more at stake here. Let's talk about things that really matter. And, one of those is, social justice and the environment and acknowledging of all people being equal. I mean, the list goes on. And so I just see it as a time of reckoning, a time for people to just get real about the stuff that really, really matters and forget about just the petty bullshit that means nothing in the big picture.
Right. It's also been fascinating too with the at the onset, the environment too, the water, the air, nature. It really does. I wonder almost if this was a necessity to kind of reset Mother Earth, because our compass was kind of, I mean, either side, whatever you are, not to get political, but we should all be on the same equal kind of playground, see eye to eye with each other. It's just unfortunate it took a pandemic for people to kind of realize that.
Well, and if you think about it on a deeper level, it's pandemics go on everywhere. I mean, Africa is actually probably one of the few continents that's really prepared for this because they've been dealing with pandemics and epidemics for so long. They're actually better prepared for something like this. It's first world countries that this is like shocking, and to me, it's even more shocking that a country like the U.S. that considered itself such a civilized place and a leading uh, leading figurehead for democracy and all that stuff. But we're the ones that have the worst numbers, the worst reactions. I mean, people are still debating whether, wearing a mask is your right or not. I mean, it's like, come on, guys. So yeah, pandemics and all these other things. It's just nature's way of saying, guys, you're out of control. I mean, I can talk about so many origin stories from so many different people, indigenous creation stories and myths, and it's always at the downfall of a particular civilization or time. You're talking about Apocalypto. That film was based on the fact that a particular culture had just gotten to the place where it was so decadent and not working anymore from its highest place and ideals. So it's just it's going to fall. And I think this is where the crossroads that we're at right now is: are we going to allow ourselves to evolve and elevate our consciousness to a place and line ourselves back up with not only Earth, but universal forces that are at work and have always been at work? And are we going to line up to it, or are we going to still just remain based in our egos and our narcissism and our bullshit? And I say bullshit, it's like fucking playing golf and doing shit that really does not matter in the long run. When you're talking about water is being used to drain the Colorado River to fucking keep these places green.
It is.
Don't get me started.
No, I actually kind of want to. And so in last March, I started this podcast because I do security for bands, actors, artists, and all this stuff. And obviously that kind of stopped with the shutdown. So I wanted to keep learning and kind of just reach out to different people, learn about whether it's human trafficking, domestic abuse, martial arts. Well, one of the topics I did back in March was martial arts, and I wanted to reach out to different forms of backgrounds and history and lineages and trainings that I'm not familiar with. One of them was Okichita with Chief George Lapide up in Toronto, this ancient indigenous Cree Nation martial art. They used the Gunstock War Club and the tomahawk. And I was, out of all of the ones I studied and learned and wanted to reach out to and talk to, Chief George, like, it blew me away. And then I started thinking, every movie, all my biggest, like, the actors and characters I really loved was either Wes Studi as Magua and Last Mohicans, or Sonny Landham as Billy and Predator, or Adam Beach and those guys and Windtalkers, or it's just, I don't know what it is about the indigenous people, but it's almost, I wish there was better representation or more representation in Hollywood, because I think their stories, whether they're good guys or bad guys or whatever, they're portrayed as like these incredible human beings.
Well, and hopefully that will change now. I think the last year has shown that representation does matter in Hollywood, and hopefully now there'll be this reaching out to more writers and creators. I mean, clearly, we're all out there. We're all ready to do this, but just just being given the opportunity to do so without always having to fall back on, because even to a degree it's still like that. I mean, it's to get a movie made that's, let's say it's based on some indigenous story, whatever else, there's still this push of like, well, we got to get the lead guy as a white guy and work the story around him. It's like, no. So until that decision is made to stop that thinking and realize that people like yourselves are actually really, really genuinely interested in a completely different perspective that is more authentic and more less romanticized of a particular time in history or whatever it is. So it's time, and we've been ready for decades.
Right. In the new world, as the dance choreographer, it must be great for directors like Terrence and productions like that actually reach out to the experts like yourself to really create this real atmosphere of what they're trying to portray. And so do you find that a lot of productions aren't doing enough of that in terms of kind of having the right people in place to teach this?
Definitely, it's always been that way. I've been pretty fortunate since I started because of the background that I had as a dancer and as a choreographer. I mean, one of my first gigs, I think, was choreographing a sequence for Friday the 13th, like this really bad, terrible TV show back in the day. But they needed something and they wanted it authentic looking. And, what does that mean? I mean, when you're talking about recreating dances like in the New World, in the 1600s, no one knows what those dances were particularly like, and especially in those areas right now. I mean, the people have been so watered down, mixed uh, with European bloodlines. But the thing is, when you have a native sensibility about your own culture, your own dances, your own songs, it's easy to then lend yourself just as well as anybody else could to a different, different nation, a different tribe, if you will, on that part, in that part of the world, and just say, okay, well, let's go back to that time frame. What was available in terms of materials and blah 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 blah. What kind of musical instruments, and then you can then distill it all down to an essence. But ultimately, the choreography itself comes from this place already of an indigenous expression. So you don't have to work hard at making things up. It's just already there. I remember I worked with a bunch of powwow dancers at one point in that show, and they would be like, "Oh, we wouldn't do this." And I was like, "What do you mean you wouldn't do that? Can you imagine being, someone telling Crazy Horse after some fierce battle or something like that? Oh, you can't really do that." And he's going to say, "Yeah, I can. It was my battle. I won. I did that, and yeah, I'm going to dance about it now and do it in my way of telling the story." So that was always my argument. It's like, why can't we? And I talk about this all the time with a lot of my contemporaries who are, in the plastic arts, painting and sculpture and installations and all that stuff. And we have been trying to move the narrative forward with what makes art indigenous, what makes it native. It's like the fact that the artists themselves makes it native. So we don't have to keep uh, limiting ourselves to a worldview that that Europe and Europeans recognize as a form of art back in the day. And let's just talk about pottery, for instance. They saw these great pieces of pottery and works of pottery from people at a time, and then they started selling that stuff, and it became about money, really. And and now you get 10 years ago, a virtual artiste coming along wanting to do a piece of pottery, and everybody goes, "Whoa, no, that doesn't look native." And he's like, "What do you mean it doesn't look native? I'm a native man, and yeah, I've been influenced by Star Wars, and I've been influenced by film and this and that and the other." And it's like, this is the piece. So pushing that narrative is hard for a colonial mindset, because colonial mindsets wants to keep you in a romanticized place, or in a place where you still remain other, mysterious, romanticized, but you're not really acknowledged and seen for who you are today. So this is a narrative that has to get pushed in all forms of art and all forms of media, music. I mean, you name it. That's what moves it forward, is allowing, Native people, indigenous people to speak for themselves in how it moves forward instead of being told, And this happens a lot in making movies. I mean, Mel Gibson was amazing in that regard, as was Terrence. I mean, to work with Terrence was such a gift. And because of working with Terrence is how I got the gig with Mel Gibson for Apocalypto. He's like, "You need this guy. He will train your actors and get them to move a way that is believable." And but like in the New World is another example. Terrence had originally written the whole script in English, and he
Wow.
wanted all of it to be in English, and he wanted us all to speak in English, but with sort of an accent that wasn't native again. But
Right.
and I just remember looking at him. I said, "Terry, we've already done Dancing with Wolves. We've done Black Robe. We've done all Last of them. We've done all these movies, and now you're going to take it backwards 10 more steps? No, you need to go forward." And that was a tough one. And as a result of that, it was turned into an Algonquian language. But the only person that he brought on board for the language was a linguist, a white, linguist, who sort of interpreted the language, but he wasn't a native speaker, because that language is not spoken there anymore. Powhatan is not spoken. So just moving forward, I ended up encountering a guy who still speaks Abenaki, and it's an Algonquian language, and it's still spoken way up north, upstate New York. So he now is the only living speaker of that language, and now there are tons of Cree speakers. It's a little bit more remote, but we can do the same thing that we do in any kind of film that's period, whether it's English and the accent has to be, 16th century English as opposed to modern English, whatever. The same thing can now happen in that. But I have to say, I'm kind of proud that I stood up to Terry at that point and said, you can't do this. You can't do a movie in English. And first of all, you're doing a story about Pocahontas anyway, in that whole story, and you're basing it basically on those same books. So you're already kind of popping out. And it was like, well, what do you suggest we do? And I go, why don't you tell two parallel stories?
Yep.
Why don't you allow me to create a movement language and a narrative within the film that just looks as if two people are simultaneously alongside each other, parallel to each other, but there is no real connect because they're just completely disparate people and they just will never see one another. And that's why you can explain now why, the John Smith character would never fully understand that way, or the other way around. And I said, and to be honest with you, moving the narrative in a positive way would be to acknowledge that Pocahontas was not just some love-struck girl who loved to fight European dudes. It's like, why not? She would have been a woman in training for the medicine ways of a matriarchal society. Show that there's this aspect there's a depth to being culturally intact with the Powhatan people. So that's what ended up being in the movie, and why I think it didn't do so well in terms of Hollywood, because Terry has he has a knack to meander through his films, and they're all beautifully and poetic, but they don't always tell a particular story. And I think in that case, with that movie, what was interesting and beautiful about it was just you just want to watch it because it was so beautiful.
Right, like you felt like you were there.
That it didn't go anywhere. We already know that history. Yeah, and we already know that history. We know how it ended up. So, but what would be important is to see maybe the journey slightly different. I think we could have gone further, but I think he was still ultimately afraid of what it is to really empower all the native people with an identity that is not Eurocentric, and that's always going to be tough.
Is there a story out there? And I know there are. Everyone has heard the Crazy Horse or Sitting Bull, and I think there should be more stories about that. But is there a story out there of a person, a man or woman, or a tribe that you think has yet to get its due diligence that you'd love to kind of put a project together for?
Oh my God, there are so many. I think personally, if I can think about, there would probably be two projects, three that I would tackle. One I won't even mention because somebody else might want to beat me to it, but it's actually based on a book, and a really well-known book that was made into a movie at one point, but it failed miserably because first of all there was no native actor involved in that role, so already you lose. That one would be a brilliant one. It's more of it's a kind of a, I don't know, takes place in the maybe 1920s, 30s in America in the Southwest. I'm not going to go any further, but there's that story I would love to tell, because now to tell it, and again, to represent those particular people down there and let that language be heard, because that language has not been used in any movies that I know of. And it's part of, they're the people that I come from. There's another movie that I would like to make that's a little more personal. It's based on a young artist, a dancer that I knew back in the day, and we helped start a whole movement in dance. I would like to use him. He died of AIDS in the early 90s, but I would like to tell his story as an artist, but not as a dancer, but as a painter, because I love painting and I love artists, painters themselves and just what they can create. So one of my pet projects is to finish this screenplay, get this screenplay out there, get it produced, or produce it myself, whatever, but get the money for it, but also do an exploration of again, what we talked about earlier, native art, native artists, and the whole idea that for us, sometimes there is no separation between life and art. They're one and the same. We live our art, and art isn't just an expression of our lives. And then the third one would be one that's more sort of biographical of my family lineage and the slave trade that actually happened in the Southwest amongst Native people being traded to one another, raided, Apaches raiding Comanches, Comanches raiding Navajos, and Utes, and trading them all off in this big slave trade that, happened in Taos. Taos was one of the big centers for slave trading back in the day, and sort of created a diaspora of Native people because they then became Hispanicized, Catholicized, and forgot who they were ultimately, but they still remained, indigenous people. That's another story that I would love to tell, based on, family histories, family oral history, but also to tell a part of history that you don't ever run into very much in any books. I mean, I think I read one called uh, the American Slave Trade or something like that, but it was more historical, not so much,
Right.
a story. But again, there's knowledge about it, but you can imagine, what the drama already in that,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, constantly work, and so I just can't stop working as an actor. It seems like these days.
Now, is there still a issue with, say, Navajo and Comanche or Apache and Huron or Iroquois? Like, is that, or did that kind of go out of the way to kind of stay together and band together now? Like, I love, like, last Mohicans, you had like the Mohawks versus the Iroquois, or all this different dynamic. But does that dynamic still exist today, where there is that kind of like that kind of energy where they still kind of don't get along with each other?
Yeah, no, that dynamic has changed to a degree. Nations that were traditional enemies, 200 years ago, that's kind of gone now. I think we've all entered a place now of indigeneity where we need to come together as just a group of indigenous people in the Americas. And, but what's changed now, before there used to be such an American identity about it, and Canada would have its own identity, and Mexico would have its own identity, and now it's kind of, I've seen just in the last year a lot of people pushing those boundaries and saying, we need to start embracing indigeneity amongst this whole Western Hemisphere and stop putting up those colonial borders for ourselves. They've already been imposed on us. Why are we going to keep adding to it? Uh, in terms of nation to nation, I mean, you mentioned the Mohawk, but Mohawk are part of the Iroquois Confederacy. So the Iroquois Confederacy embodies quite a few, uh, you know, uh, different nations, but all working together as a confederacy. And probably a lot of things that people don't know about. Our Constitution was based on the Iroquois Confederacy because they saw
Oh,
how it worked. The only difference is that these European white men couldn't figure out that it actually meant giving up the narcissism, the ego, and the power to make it work. So that's kind of where we're at right now. How can we make that truly work? Because these guys put pen to paper to create this incredible, idealistic worldview that actually worked with the Iroquois. So that's the test now, is making it work for all people. But that dynamic has definitely changed. Now we're grouping together. I mean, we still recognize it's still important to come into situations and identify yourself, your bloodlines, and the land that you come from, and acknowledge the land that you actually come to meet people. I mean, those are all protocols that will never go away and should never go away, because it's a way of acknowledging one another as we're all here together on this land. Which is one of the problems about colonization. Colonization does not acknowledge that. Colonization is just about boom, end of you. It's us now. Move forward. I mean, you see a lot of that today. I think, and all these white Americans who are like, "This is our country," and it's like, no, dude, it's not. you know,
it's true. Um, Apocalypto.
you know what I'm saying, though, right?
No, 100%. It's almost embarrassing.
Apocalypto.
Apocalypto, Zero Wolf. When you get the cat, was that the role you went out for or were picked for? or is that something you kind of, once you got on set, you landed on it?
No, yeah, no. How that worked out was basically Terrence. He called Mel up and basically says, "You need this guy in your movie." And Mel had me in mind as the character of Zero Wolf. I think he was just concerned because again he wanted faces that really did look Mayan in his eyes, and there was definitely a look. You can always you can see somebody from down there and go, oh yeah, that guy's a Mayan. This guy's a Nahuatl. You can kind of tell. And he was, I mean, I'm 6 foot. It would be rare to find a 6 foot back in those days of a Mayan. So he made me work for it. I remember clearly. I had to meet with the casting director in Santa Fe, and there was no audition. It was just simply stand in front of the camera, turn left, turn right, profile, this and that, and just say your name and all that stuff. And I just remember feeling like, oh, Jesus, here we go again. It's like, fucking look at what I do. Hire me based on that. Why do I have to do all that shit? I did it with such attitude. And so when then he actually called people into his office for meetings. He actually flew everybody in for these meetings, and he just sat and talked. I remember he looked at me and he says, yeah, I remember that. I remember that slate of yours. Kind of had a lot of attitude. He goes, I can tell you right now, as soon as I saw that, I knew you were Zero Wolf. He goes, but how tall are you? And I go, I'm 6 foot. He goes, no, you're about as tall as I am. I go, no, I'm 6 foot. And he stood up next to me, and sure enough, he was like, yeah, I'm 6 foot. You're not. And he goes, well, do you mind wearing a prosthetic nose? And I go, dude, you pay me enough. I can do anything you want. I mean, I just had fun with it at that point. So he was like, yeah, you're Zero Wolf, definitely. So he had me in mind for that role. Wear a prosthetic nose, but that wasn't a big deal.
Now, the physicality of that and the weapons and the tracking, and how much did you have a leadway did you have to kind of learn the culture and kind of what your character was kind of bred to do?
Well, we had a 3-month prep period. A lot of that was mostly immersed in language. None of us even remotely spoke Mayan, and so 3 months in training to learn language, and he made us run our asses off. We trained so hard to get into a shape that it would be believable to just see us running through these really dangerous forests. I mean, the roots, the things. I mean, dude, my knees are still fucked. My knees are so fucked from that movie, running for 11 months. But we did. We had to work our ass off, work with the weapons, do all that stuff, spear throwing. I mean, everything, just to make sure that we were comfortable with it. That's one thing I can say about Mel. He's got huge integrity as the director, and he really wants to make sure that everybody is at the top of their game for it. So we worked our asses off for it.
Yeah, it's a great movie, and every time it's on, or every time I find it on streaming, or I threw it on the Blu-ray player, I'm like, yeah, it's just like we talked about before, but hearing a snippet of that story of what that culture could have experienced, it's just, I wish there was more of that out there for us, and the fact that there was no English speaking made it that much better.
I agree. I mean, that's the great thing about Mel, and I think why he didn't even get funding originally for it, because he would not acquiesce and say, I'll do it in English. He goes, I want to do it in Mayan. No one has heard Mayan spoken in a major film. And the way Mel's so awesome that way. He would be like, basically it's a chase movie. It's an action chase movie, but on foot and in another language. And he kept the dialogue so basic. He goes, it doesn't matter that people aren't going to need to follow it and read it. They're going to be engulfed in this world, first of all, that they've never witnessed before, and a whole cultural expansion of cinema. It's like he knew that. He knew that right from the very beginning. It didn't matter. Just visually make it awesome, and he did. It's a classic.
It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool how it's come full circle. Now you're on the show Mayans, and which is it's kind of cool. that you've actually able to kind of do that little tongue-in-cheek type thing there. But to join a show like that, it must be pretty cool that you're joining something where a pop culture fandom is really rabid for that environment.
Dude, I can't even tell you. I feel so incredibly blessed, and just a gift was thrown into my lap to do this, and I didn't, it didn't shock me, that it was like, of course it's Mayans, and it's how many years later. It's like, no, it made total sense. Yeah, almost 15 years later, I guess because I was 50 when I did Apocalypto. So yeah, 15 years, 12 years to come around full circle, but do Mayans from a different perspective of, again, a modern world, America, but still subversive, underground, still, Taza is still an indigenous character who's trying to, my whole journey is always about just justifying how we're rebels, we're warriors. We still are, and the motorcycle club, I think, personifies that more than any real subversive group in America still. They're outlaws. So, I'm super blessed and super grateful for it.
Now, with your background, the Army, does it kind of help where you do a movie like Riddick or say any other movie where you have to pick up a gun or do like these military tactics? Is that kind of fun for you to kind of relive what you actually did in real life?
For sure. I have to say the most fun part though is, I think the most fun part I've always had in any of my work is just being able to do what I do, knowing it's what I do kind of in real life. And like I was trying to tell you, my life journey, my film journey, theater journey, whatever, has always been really intertwined with who I am as an artist, as a human being, and, as a spiritual being. So, like I say, the challenge for something like this, though, is it's not about shooting guns and doing all that, but it's, why are we shooting guns and why are we doing all this killing? Why are we doing all this? I've traded in basically my real horse for a motorcycle, but it's still horsepower. But it's just all an incredible opportunity to just do what, not only what you love, but again, like it's my whole life has led me to this moment. So I'm just embracing it for that.
The other day I was watching, I was trying to fall asleep, and Highlander 3 came on, and I had literally reached out to you. I reached out to you like the day before, and I'm not even thinking. I'm like, this is so. It's a sign, because it looked like you had so much fun filming that. And I guess the question, those type of roles, for you just to kind of play a character that some might be a throwaway, but you add something to the movie. It must be fun playing these kind of side characters that are just. They're memorable in their own right, but it's just that movie. It looked like you were having fun, and you weren't in there that long, but your parts were memorable.
And it's the same thing with like the Black Robe. I remember when I shot that one with Bruce Beresford. He was like, "What role do you want? I'll let you pick." And I'm like, "I'll take that one." And he goes, "It's only gonna work for like 3 days." I go, "Yeah, but we're gonna remember that character from the whole movie, rather than being in it." Sometimes it's just about those characters being more interesting, like Sicario, same thing. It's like, I wanted an opportunity to work with Benicio and Denis was just like, well, I'm tired of seeing you always a bad guy. I'm going to make you a good guy in this one. So it's like, sometimes it's just I don't know, it's working with a director who just gets you and knows that you can do anything, just given an opportunity. But Highlander, it was so funny you brought that up, because I had a blast. It's like, where else do you get paid like $50,000 for not even a week's work to just go ride horses in the snow and wield a sword and have fights? It's like, come on, I'm in.
Yeah, no, it's
I'll do it.
That's cool. And then you actually came full circle again with Mel Gibson and Bloodfather, which, well, how much was it different working with him on the same side of the camera as opposed to him on one side, you on the other this time around?
He's still the same playful guy, and even a movie like that, because he's Mel Gibson. He definitely was not directing it or anything else. He wasn't even producing it. I think in the end, maybe he like threw some money at it when they were having a little financial struggle. But bottom line is, he's always Mel, and he's always got an opinion, and people are going to value that opinion about something. Uh, for me, working with him as an actor on that one was his blast, because now we could actually take it to another level that we started in Apocalypto, because he was always, he worked with so many non-actors on that one that he always felt he had to direct me, and at one point I'd be like, Mel, I think I got this. Trust me. And so interesting to be in Bloodfather now, because like now I'm like, oh, okay, so now we're in it, and I'm chasing you. This time I'm chasing you. I'm hunting you down. And he's fun to work with. He just really is. Oh, I'll take him as a director any day, but working alongside him as an actor is just as much fun. I mean, he puts himself out there and beats himself up just like he expects you to do it, and he doesn't whine about it. So, I mean, I'm still whining about my knees 15 years later, but dude, they're thrashed.
Right. Now, when you were in the Army, right? When you were in the Army, did your love of painting and dance and stuff, did that kind of slowly come through as you were in the Army? Or is it one of those things where, and it's crazy how you ended up in the ski Alps back home after stationed in Germany. It's like you have like this period of your life. It's very fascinating. How did it kind of formulate the way it did?
Well, they all did come together because I was in the Army in Germany, but I was also a ski patrol for the Army. That's how, because of my background as a skier in New Mexico, I went in as a medic, but working in hospitals and medical detachments. But it was because I was a skier that I got onto the patrol, because they wanted actual Army guys rather than having to hire outside people, which they did some. But if it was if they had soldiers that basically knew how to ski, we were already paying them, so let's just move them down. So that's how that happened. So it was because I was already a skier. But then because I was in Germany and in Europe and skiing, and like I skied everywhere. I mean, everywhere in all those Alps. But then I started now experiencing all the art that I had studied about in the books and all the artists. Now I'm actually able to see them, the Picassos and the Matisses and all that stuff in museums now, and galleries and everything else. And so that influenced my life, because now I'm seeing it for the first time. I'm seeing the masters, and I'm seeing it like close up. And but yeah, I think it's just, art's just always had this hold on me. And I mean literature as well. I mean all of it. I mean I really took it all very seriously as a young kid. I was one of those kids, It's like I did a lot of crazy stuff, like hanging out by myself in canyons and climbing cliffs and doing all that stuff. And but I wasn't like a team sport dude, so it was like I was a reader and engulfed in books about art. And so it all just came together. It's just wild the way it came together. I mean, sometimes I'm kind of blown away at it, and I think sometimes that there's method to the madness of just surrendering to your journey and staying true to whatever it is, but you recognize signs along the way and signposts that say, oh, turn here, go there. And so even though the Army came early in my life, the end of the draft in 1973, it took me there. But what I wanted really was to take advantage of now being in Germany, being in Europe, being surrounded by a whole other language, a whole other culture. And they love Indians in Europe, especially in the 70s. And, I'd be hitchhiking all over the place and just being picked up by everybody, because they're like, hey, where are you from? So it's just like I say, it's always in the right place at the right time. And I always tell everybody that. Like when people ask me now, what advice do you have if I want to be an actor? It's like, you know what? If you need to ask that question, you'll know. You'll know what to do, where to go, and how to do it. Just do it. I mean, no one told me, oh, you need to take your $500 that you have and just move to New York. You just do it. So you have enough money to pay for rent and a pound of rice and beans until shit happens, and then there you are. You're in it. You're in the trenches, and the next thing you know it, you're touring the world in theaters and performing. So You know what I mean?
Right. If people want to see your artwork, now I don't know, do you have a gallery or do you have places where people can kind of see your print, whether it's on your website or stuff like that?
No. I think you have a misunderstanding. I love painting, but I'm not a particular painter. I collect art, but
Okay.
this thing's all reversed. Yeah, I'm not a painter. I basically the art that when I say I do art as an artist, it's everything. But I mean, it's like my houses. I'm on my third house now. I build my own houses. I design my own houses. I design the gardens and do that. I collect art. I dabble here and there with installation pieces of sorts, but definitely I'm not that kind of artist that puts a brush to a canvas and sells it.
Right.
I wish, and maybe one
Right.
day I will, but not right now. I just had to play cricket. This is like I'm reversed. There we go.
I like that.
I got bad hair. That's why I got bad hair today.
So with everything going on, and as your industry opens up, the entertainment aspect, what are some projects you have coming on, or is there anything coming up where you can you're excited to get back out there, or is there some sort of trepidation still where it's like with safety and health and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a couple of things right now. I am locked into Mayans, and I'm grateful for that because it's definitely something that's solid and it uses up a lot of my time, especially this year because of COVID. We're in production now until probably like beginning of April. The idea is that we're going to premiere and then maybe take 6 weeks off and then go right into another season. So that right there is my life is being used up.
Good.
And like I say, gladly, because I love FX and everything that we're doing here. So that, and then it's just sort of taking maybe small film projects. I mean, and again, some of them took a bite. I did a movie with Jason Momoa that he produced, and Christian Camargo is the director on it, but it hasn't been released yet. And it didn't even get to the festivals like we wanted to because of COVID. So, but that movie will be an interesting one because that's a retelling. Let's use that word better. It's a retelling of the story of Willie Boy that Robert Redford had done in the 70s. And this is more, like I say, authentic. It's part of Jason is always about, he just loves sort of setting the record straight about certain stories. And he was really passionate about this one. But, there's a couple of film projects that are there, they're looming, but there's no full commitment again because of this COVID thing. It's definitely putting a huge damper on a lot of possibilities because no one can really fully commit.
Right.
Because the minute you do, all of a sudden you're like, my show Mayans also, that happened like now in October when we started. They were like, we're going at the beginning of October. I was like, oh, okay, so I got to say no now to this movie that I was going to do. So yeah, it's all about Mayans right now, and that's a good thing because I'm so in love with the show and I'm in love with the whole creative team behind it. So I'm really good here.
It's a great character that really fits in with the history of like the Sons of Anarchy and that whole world they kind of built there. It's kind of cool to see you have that character now that other people kind of found the previous 8 years of the other show.
Yeah. Well, and we're really delving deep this season into real personal stories, and the writing is really, really amazing. So I think fans are going to be really blown away by this season.
So you are on Twitter, you're on Instagram. Is that the main places kind of fans and followers kind of see what you're up to?
I don't do Twitter anymore. I did, and to be honest with you, I was like, you know what? This is bullshit. I have to read so much crap on here. Twitter to me is just like, no, I'm sorry, I just do not get it. Instagram, I've been a little bit better with because at least it's about sharing pictures, pushing, agendas for certain things that need to happen, and re-educating people, and having a good sense of humor. And I love posting pictures of my ranch. But to be honest with you, I'm kind of at a place now too where I'm like, do I really need to be here? It's kind of like, I don't know. I'm starting to just get a whole different, like a bad taste in my mouth about social media. And I think probably one of the reasons is because I find myself on it, like just looking and being more of a voyeur. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
But again, it comes with sitting in Los Angeles with too much time on my hands and not on my ranch doing all the stuff that I really, really love doing. And so I just got more time on my hands. But yeah, Instagram at this point, Raoul Trujillo official is where I'm at. We'll see if I don't go into a hiatus soon. But so far, that's who we are.
So I guess your followers can't find you on TikTok.
That way you know. Every once in a while, I do love watching some shit on TikTok. It's like, wow, that's kind of cool.
It is. I'm not on there, but again, like you, like I'll get sent a video and I'm kind of like, oh God. But then you go down a rabbit hole. And I actually came across whatever the app is where you start off one part, but I follow this indigenous, this guy, I think he's Cree Nation, but he'll do like these dances, like the hula hoops and like the crazy, like the dances with the costumes. And it's, again, I don't know why I'm drawn to those people of that history, but it's someone using social media in a cool way to kind of learn about a different culture or a person. And for that, I'm grateful for social media. Everything else is bullshit.
Yeah, no, and I'm completely in agreement with you. And for that reason, I'll help push, like I say, certain agendas and expose people, bring attention to, missing, murdered indigenous women, culture. I mean, I remember I posted something like this little 5-year-old guy, little guy at a powwow. And this little guy was dancing so hard. And I was like, I had to post that because people need to see. Here's a little 5-year-old dancing his heart off in the way that his dancers has been doing for, forever. So yeah, that's the only reason I think I stay on it, is just to help push agendas and again, but I can actually go into the rabbit hole of YouTube. YouTube is like my weakness. I get on that thing and it's before long, you're just like, whoa, how did I end up here?
Yep. Well, I want to thank you for this, Raoul. This has been great, and I appreciate the stories and the history, and I wish you nothing but success with everything. And here's to another great season of Mayans.
Well, hey, thank you. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I don't do many of these, but you just seem to be super solid, and I liked your background, and I liked how you were, looking at things. So I thought, yeah, this could be a good one. And every once in a while, I think it's good sometimes to be able to see the people that you like and admire, and then, but hear who they are and where they come from. Because I don't want to always just be perceived as. You'd be amazed how like I'll run into people, whatever, premiere like that, and they're like, oh, you actually speak English really well. I'd be like, what the fuck? Where did that come from? I mean, like, what?
I don't actually kill people in the jungle either. Like, come on. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's been really, really awesome to talk to you as well. And please stay in touch about everything.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
I love it. All right. You take care, okay?